So if you come up here in our Megascans assets, there's these what they call atlases, where it's these flat texture looking things. So let's type in sticks. And actually, we'll use Physics Painter with these sticks. I think that'd be kind of cool. So let's use these. These are atlases, I believe. So the way these work is they're flat textures. So let's jump up a level. Actually, let's decrease the scale a little. .4. Let's jump up to the top network. Export this out. Give it a second. And here we go. We've got our atlases here. So let's save. If we dive in here, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of objects. And so the way these work, and let's isolate just our atlases here. And actually, let's unpin. So that way everything else is hidden. You'll oops. Just don't want to move my camera. There we go. The when you instance other objects, they instance them on a grid, so you guys could see how they look standing up. Atlases, they use a sphere object, and so they instance them on there, kind of like they're supposed to be like leaves or something. And these are tree twigs, and so they're cards. That's the best way to describe them. They have no depth. They're not 3D. They're just flat, stenciled out cutouts. Now, the cool thing about these, though, is they're really light, and they're just good for variation if you want to break up a shape. So if maybe we didn't want so much grass, but we wanted to have some sticks, but they're not real objects because that's more polygons, you could use atlases, and these will break up your shape. Now, if you go inside of the source, in here you have this special HDA called the Atlas Splitter. And so what this does, and there's a technique out there on the internet, if you're interested in how it's done, so you could just look up procedural geometry for Megascans atlases, and this is
about
what this HDA is doing. So it cuts out the shape here.
Description. I hope you found, and we export.
And they're ready to then be instanced around, right? So that's what this HDA does. It reads in your JPEG, and it converts it into 2D shapes, and then your texture gets put on it, and then these can be scattered around. So just so you guys know how it works, and if you want to learn how to do it, yourselves, in case it's a good little bit of knowledge to know how it works, feel free to YouTube that video. And in fact, I'll probably just put it up on the Patreon just so you guys can see it anyways. So anyways, that's how this works. And so instead of scattering on the sphere, we're going to delete the sphere. We're going to scatter on our ground like usual. And let's show all our objects again. Let's zoom out here. And let's make sure we're displacing again. Let's jump up a bit. I am not seeing them. There's a lot of stuff here though, so Oh yeah, they're there. They're just underneath everything. But you see how they're scattered around. So these are going to be like little sticks. And now we need that'll help break up some of the shapes in these gaps. So let's actually increase now our scatter count by a lot. And the cool thing is, since these basically are just cut out shapes, they don't take up any geometry really. So you could scatter tons of them without much of a problem. So there we go. Now they're all over the ground. That's probably too many, but let's come in here. And let's adjust our seed. And that's something I should have done. I forgot to tell you guys that every time you scatter on an object, the seed is the same. So you might get objects on top of objects. So try to adjust the seed. And I think we'll do something like 60,000. That might be too many. Alright. And that'll give us just a little bit of stuff on the ground. And let's do a little smaller minimum. Cool. And that'll just break up the shape a little more on the ground, just to give us some cluttering. Let's jump back up. And actually I needed to adjust the seed on this also. Alright, cool. Let's check out our render and see if our little twigs are in the scene. And the atlases are great to add a lot of details without adding necessarily geometry. So like if you want little bits of moss or clovers or little flowers or something growing on something without actually having the geometry there, it adds some detail. So yeah, if we zoom in here, we should see some of those twigs. And it's kind of hard to tell since there's so much stuff in here, so much variation. But that's good. That's what we want. So let's actually delete this. Let's save a screenshot here. And let's see what it looks like with and without the instanced twigs, just so we could test out the difference. So if we zoom in here, yeah, so you see that? It's subtle. But those little differences, you know, they add a little more character to your render. More randomness, more realism. So let's turn that back on, and actually let's make that a little bigger. So I think 0.8 was a good size. Maybe 0.7, a little bit smaller. Alright. And so yeah, that's how you guys could use atlases. And actually, let's look up some flower. Nope. Clover. Or actually all. Let's go into the all category here. I guess I don't have a flower atlas. Maybe. Yeah, I guess I didn't. So, yeah, this is a great one. And there's tons, you know. There's all these different ones you guys could download and mess around with. These little flower ones, the clover ones. So I recommend you guys explore some of these. And actually, I think I'm going to grab this. This looks cool. For our scene, some little flowers there. And I think we'll grab this. This looks good too, to scatter on top of our rock. And actually, let's export this. And we'll get this. And I mean, yeah, look how useful Megascans is. This makes your job way easier. Let's export these. And this was only 1 point, you know, which is pretty much nothing. Let that load in. We're going to come in here, get rid of our grid. Make sure this is using point cloud. Dive in. Switch over to our terrain. Switch our seed around. Let's do 500. Let's add a displacement source. They're a little small. Let's increase the scale a bit. Cool. And we'll grab our other atlas here. And yeah, I need to organize this soon because it's starting to get bigger. And using this, instead of scattering on our sphere, get rid of our sphere again. And oops, let's come in here, make sure, using point cloud, dive in. We're going to scatter these instead of our ground. We're going to put them on our rock. And so let's see, where's it at? Icelandic, mossy rock. I'm not sure which one it was. Let's see if it's that one. Man, looks like it isn't that one. Is it this one? Which one was it? Okay, yeah, it's this one. So Icelandic Mossy Rock 1. And these are the smaller ones. Okay. So let's come in here. Mossy Rock, yep, 1. And let's have it bias on the direction. Yep. Density, scatter. Let's just try 1,000. And I'm getting an error. Invalid SOP. Huh. Icelandic rock. Oh, that's why. I need this on top of our... There we go. And let's hit render and see if our little flower things are on top of that rock now. And we've got other flowers laid out. So this might take a second again to process all the new textures. in the meantime, I'm going to look around for something else to scatter those little logs. And okay, so we do have our little flowers here, our yellow flowers, our blue ones. And you'll notice right here, on our rock now, we have those 4-leaf clovers. And so that just adds some nice little shape breakup and variation on top of our rock without actually having grass or mottled geometry on top. So yeah, this is starting to look kind of cool. You know, it's looking pretty realistic. And I think we could add a tree or something off camera to cast a nice shadow across our scene. That would kind of give us some cool composition. But before we do that, let's talk about scattering some assets with Physics Painter, dropping stuff, and then, you know, kind of adding a little bit of realistic movement. So let's type in rock. And actually, we're probably going to get a lot of stuff. So let me I'm going to pause it because I'm going to look around for the right rock I want, and then I'll show you guys how to use Physics Painter inside of Redshift, which is part of the game dev tools. So make sure you guys have this installed if you want to do this part. And I'll be right back. Alright guys, so I think I'm going to scatter these rocks, these little forest pebbles. I think the color and stuff will work out. So again, make sure that you have your live link always open, and that'll keep things, you know, connected. And what we're going to do is we're going to scatter and collide against this rock here using Physics Painter. So let's jump back up. And we're going to select here, we've got our rock object here. If we jump in here. And so if you have the game dev tools installed, as soon as you start typing physics, you'll get this SOP called Physics Painter. We'll plug this in here. We're going to select this. And once we have this selected, make sure you're currently selected on this node. And what will happen, oops, and actually I should stop, because the frame we're on, it simulates up to that frame. So let's go back to the start. And when you have your Physics Painter node selected, Megascans will automatically know, oh, you want to use these assets for Physics Painter. So when I hit export here, it's going to automatically know. So if I come down here, we've got our forest pebbles. And what we want to do, you'll notice we're going to hide the grid here because we're not going to use the grid. And we come up to our rock asset. This should have been populated, and it looks like it didn't. Activate. Huh. So, okay, I don't know if, I'm guessing they must have updated this because, oh no, there we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this used to just be exposed. I'm using the latest version of the game dev tool, so I'm guessing they've been updating this a little. But so if you click on dynamic and you open this up, you'll see that all our objects are automatically added in here. And so, and then you have your static objects, your strokes. You guys should watch the whole tutorial on Physics Painter because there's just a whole bunch of options, but I'm not here to explain that part. So we're going to switch to show handles to use the Physics Painter tool. So we're going to select our geometry here. And what just happened? What's going on here? Clear all paint. Why is it? And yeah, everything's populated here, so it should be working. But oh, I know what it is. The that's why the brush tool isn't showing up. My viewport's pinned, so there we go. Now we've got our brush. So make sure to unpin, otherwise you're not going to be able to use the brush tool. So shift click, left mouse click drag, or middle mouse scroll wheel increases or decreases your brush size. Now this is going to randomly pick up all these little rocks, and we can change the scale. We're going to drop down a few of them right here. Let's just paint around. Actually, let's try paint bucket mode. And that just paints a lot of objects all at once. So if we zoom in here, you'll see how it kind of painted a lot. So let's delete our paint buckets, and let's just draw a couple strokes. Couple strokes up here. Let's maybe decrease our brush size. A couple more up on the top. And now if we press play, these are going to simulate. So let's press play. And you'll see that they'll hit and start rolling down naturally like you would expect down the edges. So this is really, really cool. And you kind of get like nice natural pocketing and collecting of the rocks. And so you could dry the paint. And what that means is that will no longer be simulated. And it's now its own static data. You could think of it that way. So if we come back up here, you can keep painting. So then you could start adding more layers. Let's make a couple bigger rocks. And let's do less of them, so maybe 5 this time. And these rocks will be 2 and 3. So these should be bigger. And that's probably way too many. And let's just press play. Give them a second to do their thing. And I think that's cool. And we'll freeze this also. Or dry it, I should say. So nice. Now we've got, if we zoom in here, notice how we've got that nice buildup of the rocks in between. They kind of scattered around like you would expect because it's using the Bullet physics engine, which is really cool. Really cool environment tool. So let's save. Let's jump back out. And actually hide that. And yeah, I think everything's okay. Oops. Not that. Okay. Let's jump back out. Let's just see what we get. So let's save in case, you know, anything goes wrong. Let's hit render. This is going to take a little second again to process all the new textures. And it's actually showing our physics painter surface, which we do not want. But let's zoom in here and see if our rocks are at least there. And they do look like they are. So let's jump back in here. Give this a second. And actually the reason is, I forgot, you gotta output this out to something else. So we're gonna make this like a, let's just drop down a null here. And so if we select this, you'll see that that's just our rocks on their own. And so we want this to be our render. And give it a second to process here. And we're going to have our output, though, being a completely different... oops. So we'll just call this fizz out. And we'll load this in a different object. So we'll just come down here to the forest pebbles. And we'll get rid of this grid. And we'll drop down a file. Oops. Call this fizz painted. Dive in. Delete that. Object merge. And we'll look for, probably should have done it this way instead of doing the simulation. At that point, this would have just simplified things. So, matter of fact, yeah, let's do that. The right way to do this would be to come in here. We'll plug this in here. We'll just connect it. We'll cut this and come down here. Load in that out that we had. Let's look for that Icelandic rock. There we go, this one. And it should be this one. Fizz out. There we go. We'll paste that in here. Plug that in. It should give us the same, yeah, the same result. Cool. And then now we'll drop down another null. And this will be our render null. And that'll just give us only the rocks. Since that's what this node does. It outputs the object. Now if we had higher resolution, we're using LOD5s. So LOD 0 or whatever, or full resolution, you could activate use render mesh and then point it to that object. Since these rocks are tiny, honestly, I don't see the point. So we'll keep it like this. So now, if everything is working correctly, it should work. Yeah, there we go. Now let's zoom in here, make sure. Yeah, our rocks got their little shaders. Cool. So you guys can see how we've got these little rocks now scattered around to kind of break up the shape and just give us more, you know, like the rock fell apart or something and pieces came off. Okay, cool. So that's how you use Physics Painter. And I think the next thing we could talk about is how to mix different surfaces. So right now we've got all the same terrain, which I think still looks good. But let's say we wanted to mix the two terrains together with something else. So right now, if we come into our material and we dive in here, you'll notice that we've got mossy ground. And it's only one material coming in here, one displacement going into our redshift output. So what if we want to load up a different material surface and mix it? So let's go. It's I don't know, mud, no. Force mulch. I think this is the one we're using. Moss. Yeah, this is the one we got right now. That's too rough. Though it might look kind of cool if we mix this in. And so what this does, we're going to mix it kind of like you would in Quixel Mixer, where you can layer stuff. Sand and rocks. Let's actually go back up, and one of the cool things about the mixer here, or not the mixer, Quixel Bridge, is if you click something, you'll get like similar assets. And so we can mix stuff. And let's click on this. Oh, that's mossy wall. It's the one I already have. Moss. Let's mix it with this. Let's see what happens. It might not work, you know, but let's download it. It's only 2 points. It's worth trying, you know, and that way I can show you guys how to mix these things. So let that load, and we're going to export this into our scene. And let me look up log. We might use this log here with Physics Painter and drop it on some things just for experiment purposes. Or let's see, wood. Or one of these maybe with Physics Painter would be kind of cool. I think this is yeah, it's a 3D asset. So we'll try this with Physics Painter next also. Alright, so we've got our Icelandic rock here. So if we dive in, here's our setup. We don't need the material. Oops. We only need the displacement, the material itself, and the mossy, the HDA. So we're going to take that out. We'll just disable that for now, or bypass it so we don't click it later on accident. Let's set that up, paste this in, and so now we've got our base layer and another layer we want to mix in. And so the way this works is you need to use two things. If you start typing mixer, you'll see that there's this redshift, the Quixel redshift mixer. So we need this. And if you also start typing blend, we need the redshift material blender. And so what's going to happen is this is going to let you mix the inputs and then the outputs. So then you have top, bottom, the threshold, and the radius. And these two things you could use to input. Let's say you have user data, like user data color, and you made a noise on your terrain or your object. You can read in the threshold into as a user data file. We're not going to do that since this is kind of already flat, and we're going to just use the height differences to blend the two, just like you would in what's it called, Quixel Mixer. So we have our two displacements, and these need to get blended together before going into here. And then the material blender is what's going to blend the two layers into each other. So we're going to blend in this as our base layer. Or we could do, I don't think it'll matter since it's working with displacement. So we're going to just plug that in. And then we've got our second material. And we're going to plug this in as a layer color. And what we need to do is plug in the displacement. So our displacement, our rock, we're going to make that the bottom, but we could switch it later if we decide to make it different. And we're going to unplug our displacement here. Move it up. And this is going to be our bottom now, or our top, I should say. And then you have your mix, your mask, or inverted mask. And so what that is, and so where'd it go? Oh, the where's the other note? There we go. This now plugs in to here, into our surface, and let's actually make this bigger. And actually, it's not the displacements that mix in, it's the displacement blender. And we'll make this the base input, and these need to get deleted. It's the other way around. It's the displacement source, like the texture, not the data after being displaced. So this is the we'll just say this is the bottom. And let's come down here, find our displacement top, and then the output here is kind of a little confusing with all the stuff that's going on. Let's move this down. Actually, this should all move up top, but whatever, let's delete that. We don't need that bump node. The mixer mask is what we're going to use to control the blending weight. So if we open this, we're going to control this, the blending weight, with our mask. So this should work, and then we'll move this down and connect this with our displacement. So let's see what happens here. And let's test this out. And it might be a little too strong. That's what the mixer's for. So let's see what we get. And I'll pause this because it's got to reprocess the new textures again. That might take a couple seconds. And so it looks like our displacement is blending together, but our texture layering isn't being masked, and that's because I need to plug in this mask output also to our blender, not just the displacement blender. So if I plug it into blend color, now we should get a mix of the displacements and the blender, and then we just have to adjust our threshold to show more or less of one or the other. So okay, right now we've got what looks like our more of the regular old ground. You can see that it's changing though. See that? So let's see what happens if I just slide this all the way over here. I don't remember if this is the top or the bottom displacement, which one supersedes, so we'll see. I think, okay, yeah, so you can see that this now is using the texture beneath. So let's maybe move it back down to strike point 4. Or where was it at? It was at 1. Strike point 9, half of that where we had it at. And you guys can see now it's kind of blending in. All right, let's I want a little bit more of the grass. So let's slide it more this way. But I do kind of want that breakup, the rock kind of showing through. So now it's not enough. We could try additive mode. It'll add the two displacements just to see, you know, what do we get. You're not supposed to, I mean, technically, but, you know, it might give us an interesting result. And I think that just disabled it completely. Let's slide this over. Let's try 0.8. Okay, this is a little different. Now we're starting to get some of that rock to show up. So this looks cool. And that's kind of just giving us more variation, you know, on the surface. So if we compare it to before, now we're kind of getting a little bit of that breakup. So that gives us more, again, more realism, more variation. Now, let's save this. And I'll show you guys what the radius does. So right now the radius is 0.2. If we increase this and I hit render, you'll see the difference. So you could think, there we go. You could see how what it does is it basically it blurs or feathers the transition. See? I personally don't like it that high for this particular thing. Let's try 0.1. Actually, no, 0.01. That's where we had it at 0.2. And that's going to make it sharp again on the edges. So maybe we'll add a little more blurring, but not too much. But let's see how it looks if it's really sharp. It almost looks like rocks embedded in the dirt, which I do like. It's kind of cool. But let's try 0.1. Let's see how it looks. It's going to blend that out. This looks a little more organic. Yeah, so, okay, we're going to stick with this. I think 0.1 looks nice. So if we compare it, let's get rid of our last one. Compare it to the original. You know, that's giving us nice variations on our surface. Cool. I think we could maybe scatter some of these logs here. So I'll do that. I'm not going to show you guys me doing that because you guys have already seen me scatter a bazillion things. So, but it's going to be the same process. And I think I'll show you guys how to manually paint in some assets using the density attribute. So I think we'll paint in mushrooms in a couple spots, since I don't want them everywhere, just in some little locations here and there. So we'll do that. So I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to just load up and scatter these logs, and I'm going to load up the mushrooms also. Alright guys, so now we're going to manually paint in some mushrooms. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So we've got our mushrooms here. They're on a grid. So right out of the gate, we need to switch this over. Make sure we're using point clouds. I'm going to dive in. Let's just move our seed around. And oops, we want to load up our main terrain. So let's bring that up. There it is. And cool. So that's our terrain that we're going to work on. Now, how do we tell the instancer to scatter onto our object? So to do this, we need to use a paint SOP, and this lets you paint onto a surface. So if we click that, you'll see that we've got our terrain here. And if we switch over to the tool itself, just like Physics Painter, we'll have a little option here to paint around and do stuff. Now, let's activate Ghost Other Objects so we can kind of see where we're painting. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. And we're going to flood it all black. So black means don't instance, and when you paint with the white, it's going to instance points there. So we're going to add a couple mushrooms, maybe around here, some here, a couple in this shady area, maybe a few over here, a couple down here. So something like that. Now, it's not going to look like it's doing anything yet. And the reason is, if we come down here, let's move this over, and we activate the scatter, it's going to just scatter points everywhere. So let's just make this 1,000, for example. And let's jump up and get rid of our grid. Here we go. And let's pin this so you guys can see it. And let's make our mushrooms bigger, because I think they're pretty small. Oops, not density. Scale. And I am not seeing them, which is weird. That is strange. Why are there none showing up? Huh. Let's add our grid back in here. Let's select that grid. Let's jump up here, pin that, hide other objects, and it looks like there are no mushrooms. So I think there's a issue with these. Oh, that's right. The some assets, when they come in empty like this, if we check it out, if we look at the source, and we zoom in and there's nothing, it means that this asset, for some reason, they don't have the LOD that I chose. And there's a few of the older ones, like the mushrooms, that have this problem. So we're going to actually have to delete this and load in another LOD. Alright, so here we go. Our mushrooms are loaded in, and these do look like they're correct this time around. Let's hide everything. And yeah, there we go. So they're on this grid now. Okay, cool. So this time it worked. It just so happened that that mushroom set had a bad LOD, or it didn't import right or something. So sometimes that happens, guys. If you notice that nothing came in, just try a different LOD or try reloading it. It just sometimes happens. So anyways, we're going to ghost other objects. We're going to get rid of the grid. Come in here to our instances. Once again, activate point clouds. We're going to jump in. We're going to switch over to our grid object. And now what we want to do is drop down a paint, SOP, plug this in, highlight it so we can see it. We're going to increase our brush size. We're going to fill it all black. And once again, paint in some white. A couple spots. Some of these shadier areas. And maybe out there somewhere. Okay, cool. So now we've got this. Now if I switch over to simple scattering, and let's actually jump up a node and pin this. And I increase the scale so you guys can see it if they're around here. There we go. You'll see that they're still all over the place. They're not like, let's increase the density so you guys can see it even better. They're still growing all over the place. So they're not respecting my paint rules. And so the way you have to do this is you have to go first into density, and slope, you want none. You don't want any of these, the noise or any of that stuff to influence it. You can activate it and adjust it, but we want it to respect our painting position more. So the next thing you got to do is you have to tell it to convert this CD attribute into density. So using a wrangle, and there's several ways you could do this, just a wrangle is the easiest. I'm going to drop it in here. We're going to call this F for float, which is what we're making, density. And we're going to make this equal at, which is our CD, .r, and we just the reason .r and then semicolon to close. The reason .r is because we just want the red, black and white, you know, so just red channel. So if we do that, boom, instantly you'll see that our mushrooms are now growing in those locations. Now we could activate slope as a multiply or an add, but then you see it'll get rid of it. So that's why I mentioned you could do that. And multiply will multiply with the slope. All right, cool. And yeah, there's noise options too if you want to adjust the noise distributions. And you could multiply it on top or add it or subtract it. See how it adjusts it. That's up to you guys, however you guys want to approach that. So we're going to keep it on none for slope. And obviously now we have way too many points scattered. So let's shrink this down to a lot less. Let's do maybe 50. So something like that. Maybe drop our scale down because that's a little big. Let's do 8. And yeah, neat. You guys could just come in here and paint in more of those details. Maybe add a little more in here. And jump back out. And now we've got some mushrooms scattered around. So let's save this and let's render our shot and see what we've got so far. So I'll pause this while it loads up the new textures and stuff. Shouldn't take too long, but still. And here we go. The IPR started. If we zoom in here, you can see a couple of those little mushrooms. In a couple spots. And actually, let's jump in here and also account for our displacement. Forgot about that. And I think we can make the mushrooms a little bigger. So let's go back to 10. Yeah, they're a little bigger now. And I think we could scatter a different kind of mushroom next. So there's these white mushrooms, these red ones. There's plenty of different options. So I think I'm going to go with a couple of the white. Actually, no, I'm going to go with a couple of red ones for contrast. So I'm going to load these in. So let's pause the IPR. And we'll export these out. And I'm going to just go in there and paint a couple different spots again to kind of get some of those mushrooms scattered around. So I'll be back. Alright guys, I'm back. So I manually came in here and painted in using the same technique some little red mushrooms to kind of just break up some shapes. And yeah, everything's starting to come together. It looks pretty cool. Let's rotate around and just kind of check out some different angles here. And, you know, you guys can see that we've got some nice variation here. Let's look at it from top down. The surface is blending. There's grass. There's different little flowers and the rocks. Everything's kind of just working together now. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think with this we'll get some interesting renders later. Maybe let's zoom in and check out what we might get up close. You know, and look at this. We've got some nice little rocks building up in the grass. Just lots of interesting variations here. And I like how these shadows are kind of passing on here. So I'm going to probably add some different trees off camera next, and that'll just give us some interesting shadows on the ground. And after that, you know, we could play around with the bokeh and stuff. Get some other interesting looks. And maybe we'll add a little bit of atmosphere. But yeah, overall, you know, pretty neat results so far. And of course, we could always come in here into the post effects and, you know, go wild. Adjust the temperature. We could warm it up a little. Cool it down. Could always put a LUT on top of things. There's just so many different options we could, you know, play around with when we decide to go for our final renders. Like, this looks kind of cool. I actually like this angle, so I think we'll make a new camera from this. Since I think this is a nice view here. And there we go, camera number 2. So let's reload so that it shows up here as an option. Here we go, camera number 2. And this is what it looks like raw, just sRGB. We're going to switch it over to OCIO. And actually, I should have just duplicated the post effects. Let's load this up. Base contrast. Or actually, be easier is just if I duplicate this camera here. And I just copy and paste the transforms. So translate, copy, paste values, copy, paste values, and let's reload. and switch over to render cam 1. And which LUT was I using? Oh, it didn't save it, unfortunately. So I have to. Oh, I guess maybe it did. Let's tone that down a little. Cool. Let's activate the bokeh. Using the new point-click focus, we'll just click where we want to focus. So we'll focus on this rock right here. Let's bring this down. And let's increase the depth of field. And I think this is nice. You know, and just like that, we've got some pretty interesting stuff going on here. Let's disable that, and let's go for a final render. Just to kind of test out what we've got. And some sort of error came up. Oh, and that's the adaptive tessellation. For some reason is activated on that, but there is no adaptive tessellation, so I'm gonna have to go in there and fix those. But anyways, let's go for final render. So 16. Let's just throw brute force raise at it. I don't really care too much. It's not gonna take too long. 0.3. And let's make this resolution a little bigger. So on our render cam 1, let's make this 1080p. And let's just render. See what we get. So I'll pause this, guys, for a second while this renders out. And we'll see what we get. Hopefully something pretty cool. And yeah, it looks like we've got depth of field and everything. It's rendering pretty quick too. Alright, I'll be back. Alright guys, so here's the render result. Took about a little shy of 4 minutes. This one has lens distortion. This version does not. So you guys can see the difference. But yeah, cool. So I think this is a nice little result. And I think I might make a little bit of an animation. And I'll show you guys how to animate the wind next. So if we hit save here. And we just jump into, I don't know, the grass or something. One of these grasses. Like this one. Inside of the instance node, under our Quixel Simple Scatter, there's an option for motion. You click Enable Animated Motion, and this will give you a wind, speed, direction, frequency, amplitude for a basic wind. So if I press play, and actually I need to jump back up a level. And now I press play. You'll see how our plants are kind of moving around and stuff. And yeah, it's that simple. It's not, it's not even anything particularly complex. So now you guys know how to animate the the brushes and stuff and the plants. And yeah, you could just adjust the strength. So right now I think it's a little too fast, maybe too strong. So we'll try 1, maybe a smaller amplitude of, I don't know, 0.8. And we'll come up and recheck this. Now you guys can see how some stuff is moving. And yeah, that's simple. So I'm gonna maybe do a render camera move, and I'm gonna just lock in on this plant here that I have my focus on. And I think I'll just have the camera kind of rotate around while the other bushes and stuff are slowly animated and moving. And so yeah, I think I'll do that. So I pretty much have covered everything there is to Megascans overall, not in depth parameter wise, but all the options and tools you guys have. So I'm going to work on that animation, and I think I'm going to still bring in a tree to cast some shadow back here, and we'll see what we end up with. So I'll be back. Hey guys, just before I send off this render, just wanted to show you real quick the animation using the flipbook. So we're going to just hit play, and as you guys can see, we've got movement all over our plants, and the camera's rotating around our focal point with a little bit of noise added to the null just to kind of get that walking movement kind of feel. So yeah, cool. So this is going to be our render, and I'm going to submit this over to Deadline and render out. And I think we'll try out a different angle later, maybe for some stills. But this, I think, will be our beauty shot animation. And so yeah, it's only a couple seconds long, 96 frames, so should take maybe a day to render out. So yeah, cool. Alright guys, so our render has finished. Here we've got all our frames. The deadline task has completed, so let's check out the result of everything. So let's go to render, mplay, load disk from files. Give that a second, and go under our render tab, select that. It'll bring it in. We gotta gamma correct this to linear. There we go. And yeah, let's press play, see what happens. And we'll let it pass through one time. And so far, it looks pretty nice. We've got our clean depth of field, we got our animation going on, subtle movement, we got some movement of the camera. Cool. And you can see the grass moving outside of the frame. So yeah guys, that's the result of this month's tutorial, and hopefully you guys learned all the new neat tools inside of Megascans Live Link. And I highly recommend the Megascans library. It's not too expensive, especially now with the new point system. Really recommend it if you guys need, you know, different assets and materials to kind of just bash something together on top of whatever you're modeling, or if you're building some sci-fi structure, I don't know, right? And this is great to also mix together with live plates and whatnot. So yeah. I think we covered pretty much all the necessary tasks. And actually, one thing before I end this video, I did notice in the frames I was rendering that Megascans does not account for translucency in the grass and stuff. So, and it took me a little bit to realize what was going on. But if you go into, for example, let's find our grass here. This grass. And you go inside of the material, when Megascans automatically loads it in, it does not add anything to your backlight / translucency. So all I did was I just added a color correct in between to split off the diffuse, and I just shifted the hue just a little bit and added a little more saturation, and then I plugged that into the color and had a weight of 0.3. 0.5 was too see-through, so 0.3 is a nice little kind of generic all-around setting, and so that's what gave me this nice see-throughness on some of the grass and leaves where the light's penetrating in. So like a fake SSS, since SSS doesn't work on 2D flat geometry, but translucency does. So just something to keep in mind that Megascans does not use this. And so if you want better quality results, I recommend you at least put that in and add a little bit of weight to that. It'll make things look a little nicer. But yeah, that's the only other thing I noticed. And so yeah, everything looks you know, it's a cool little project. Hopefully you guys learned some new techniques. And yeah, I really appreciate all the feedback and all the support on Patreon and YouTube. And like I said, I'm gonna hopefully wrap up the material pack for Houdini, and because you guys saw that error that I had in the beginning of this tutorial, and so I need to fix a couple things, and once that's cleaned up, I'll be sharing it with all you guys so you guys can test it out. And also, if you guys have noticed, I shared a custom bokeh shader that I'm working on. That still needs a little bit more work to package it up as an HDA also, but I'll share that next. And a lot of people have also asked about my custom OCIO profile. Recently, I've been waiting for Redshift to include looks support because that opens up more possibilities, and they just added that in 3.08. So now that they've added look support, I'll be revisiting that OCIO profile and cleaning it up to support looks, and then I'll share that also with all my patrons. So thanks again, guys, and have a good day.